As usual, I am freaking out because it is time for the perennial mid-year book freakout tag. I can't believe this is my 4th year doing this tag. Who am I? I am Daisy Ex Machina, the drag queen detective who investigates all things speculative in science fiction, fantasy, and horror. Did I really say this is my 4th year doing this tag? Man, where does the time go? Prompt 1. Best book you've read so far in 2023. This is easy. The Book That Wouldn't Burn by Mark Lawrence. I recently picked this book for Shelve It or Shove It and wasn't thrilled, to say the least, to find out it was the first book in a trilogy. I prefer to wait for either the whole trilogy to be out or at least the second book. I didn't have huge expectations based on the blurb, but the book blew me away. It's an epic fantasy on a world that's pretty much a desert wasteland, or at least the part of the world we're focused on. But there is this one city that dominates everything, and in this one city is a library that makes the house in Piranesi look like a pool house. The story involves 2 POV characters, Livera, a young desert girl who is poor and doesn't really know she is, and Evar, who is trapped in the library. The story starts off like a standard fantasy, with human civilization threatened by the race of ugly-looking desert orcs, in this case called sabers. But there are so many twists and turns that take this story to a whole new level. It alternates between funny and sad and shocking and profound. Toss in a helping of Narnia, and we're off to the races. It's going to be tough to knock this book out of my top read of 2023. And even though it's the first book in a trilogy, I'm glad I read it. 2. Best sequel you've read so far in 2023. Oh, that's another easy one. Lords of Uncreation by Adrian Tchaikovsky, the conclusion to the Final Architecture series. I really loved the first 2 books, and this one didn't disappoint. The series opens in the aftermath of the destruction of Earth by these moon-sized aliens called architects, because they carve up planets like artwork. We get space battles, a really in-depth mystery involving hyperspace based on Tchaikovsky's wonderful world building, and we get aliens. So many aliens. Clam aliens, insect colony aliens, hive mind aliens. Just what I look for in science fiction. Now, there are a lot of POV characters which can get frustrating, especially when you get engaged in a storyline, but then you have to suddenly pause to switch to a different POV. But really, this is an excellent series for anyone who really likes their science fiction hard. Number 3, new release you haven't read yet but want to. There's a few books that were released which I didn't pick for Shelve It or Shove It, which I still want to read. I'm curious about TJ Klune's Lives of Puppets. Though I wasn't a big fan of his previous book, Under the Whispering Door, I did really like House in the Cerulean Sea. I still have my eye on Salman Rushdie's fantasy novel, Victory City. I'm also interested in Leigh Bardugo's adult fiction, since I really enjoyed the Six of Crows duology. And I know Hellbent was just released, which is the second book in a series, so I may pull the trigger on that series. So many books, so little time. Number 4, most anticipated release for the second half of the year. Okay, I'm a bad booktuber. Bad booktuber. I don't have a TBR. I have gotten in the habit of not picking a new book until I'll finish reading whatever I'm reading. So I don't usually have a TBR and don't really track what's being released. That said, if I am reading a series, I'll definitely look out for the next book. So I guess I'm really looking forward to the next book in George R.R. Martin's Song of Fire and Ice. Wait, what? What do you mean he's not going to release? Number 5, biggest disappointment. Well, I did DNF one book this year, and I hate DNFing books, but that book is The Citadel of Forgotten Myths by Michael Moorcock, the latest in his Elric Stormbringer series. Now, it has been decades since I've read Moorcock, and was actually shocked he was writing, which is one of the reasons why I picked it up. But I think there is a reason I've never been a huge fan. His writing style feels very old-fashioned, at least to me. It felt like it was reaching for literary, like a Gene Wolfe or a Jack Vance, that type of writing style, but I just couldn't get into the story. I wasn't engaged. I got bored. So, yeah. Number 6, favorite new author debut or new to you? Well, it has to be Mark Lawrence, who wrote The Book That Wouldn't Burn. He's definitely a seasoned author, not a debut, but if his other books are similar, I definitely want to read more. If we're talking about debuts, the most impressive debut I read is probably The Book Eaters by Sun Yi Dean. And I've been searching for new horror writers and thought Sun Yi Dean created a very impressive new monster, totally original and fascinating and unique. 7, biggest surprise. Let's go with W.H. Pugmire, the gender non-conforming Lovecraftian author who I read for the Transgirl April Readathon. I read one of his books called Encounters with Enoch Coffin. Pugmire is really not that well known outside of the Lovecraftian zines. Encounters was a collection of short stories featuring the main character of Enoch Coffin, a very dark, unlikable, dangerous artist who is fascinated by the occult. Most of the stories reference Lovecraftian mythology, but most of all, they were really scary. I actually cringed reading some of these stories. I was very surprised how much I enjoyed being grossed out by Pugmire. If you are a fan of Lovecraft, I think you'll really enjoy this collection, especially since it feels like it was written in the Lovecraftian style, only with more sex. Number 8, book that made you happy. That's another easy one, Legends and Latte by Travis Baldree. I kept hearing about this book and I finally picked it up. It was so much fun, about an orc adventurer who retires and opens a coffee shop. It's been described as a cozy fantasy, meaning a small little story without huge world-breaking stakes like you find in most other fantasies. But here, the stakes involve things like how to attract new customers who never heard of coffee, or whether or not to sell baked goods. It's so much fun, especially if you are a fan of found family storylines. Number 9, newest fictional crush. I almost never get crushes on characters, but for this question, I'll choose Katrina Wynn, the violin prodigy in Light from Uncommon Stars by Rika Aoki, because I just wanted to give her a hug. If you've read the book, then I'm sure you understand. Number 10, newest favorite character, Mona the Baker from A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking by T. Kingfisher. Is this a middle grade book? A young adult book? An adult book? Who knows and who cares? The novel is written in first person from Mona's point of view. She is 14 years old and has a magic power which involves baking. Her familiar is a sourdough starter, her muffins don't burn, and she can make gingerbread men dance. But what T. Kingfisher brings to the table in terms of writing is voice. The voice of Mona from page 1 to the end is so funny and strong and introspective that you just can't help falling in love with her. I will say the middle of the book was a little soggy for me. The plot seemed to spin on its wheels for a bit, but I didn't care because I was so in love with Mona. Though they have totally different personalities, she reminded me a lot of Flavia de Luce. Number 11, book that made you cry. No book has made me cry this year, but the most heart-wrenching book is probably Light from Uncommon Stars by Rika Aoki, which I've mentioned before. Katrina Nguyen, the violin prodigy I wanted to give a hug to, is a young trans woman with such low self-esteem because of how she has been treated by her parents, her friends, society, and her journey to empowerment is so powerful. It's a journey that involves the Queen of Hell and space aliens who make donuts. Anyway, the book melts even this tough old heart. Number 12, the most beautiful book you've bought so far this year or received. Now, most of you probably know that I don't buy physical books anymore. I almost exclusively read ebooks because my eyesight isn't great, and being able to enlarge the font on e-readers is a feature that's hard for me to turn away from. But just looking at the covers, I have to say, The Book That Wouldn't Burn has a spectacular cover. That golden library that seems to go on forever is absolutely beautiful. Just look at it. Look at it. Number 13, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? Once again, I'm never quite aware of the release dates of books. I take them as they come, and I like to be surprised and shelve it or shove it. And I also don't keep a TBR. However, I am trying to read all of the Robert Heinlein juveniles. I've read 9 so far, and yes, I am including Podcane of Mars. And that leaves 4 more I need to read: Rocket Ship Galileo, Space Cadet, The Rolling Stones, and Time for the Stars. I want to know what your answers are to these prompts. At least let me know what your favorite book that you've read so far this year is. Let me know down in the comments, and while you're there, give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Or if you are a booktuber, then do the darn tag. What are you waiting for? Until we meet again, may all the books you read be blessed.